Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 477, featuring Joel Hynek. Yes, a true legend in the visual effects industry. Someone who has a career that goes way, way back. In fact, one of his first films was Xanadu, believe it or not. But he's actually famous for lots of other things as well. He was one of the people who was one of the creators of the Predator effect in the movie Predator, like the invisible cloak thing, the incredible stuff that he's done. He actually also won an Academy Award for the movie What Dreams May Come. He's been doing this for a very long time. Fascinating person, hilarious person, actually. Really love his company. I had the pleasure of working with him on the movie Stealth, which is, not necessarily the greatest film, but a movie that has some hilarious stories, which Joel tells. In fact, he tells some amazing stories about how he has so many death-defying things that happen to him while working in visual effects. Very surprising. Love his stories. Really great stuff. So amazing to have him on. Really great guy to have in the podcast. And you will get to learn a little bit about what the Hynek scale is. Yes, it's actually a real thing. He talks about it. It's just a little bit. It comes from his father, believe it or not. A really fascinating guy. Loved meeting Joel. I actually saw him. We ran into each other at AI on the Lot, and that's how we connected to do this podcast. Really cool to do that. Speaking of AI on the Lot, I was actually there doing a talk on a panel about virtual production and AI. And I just want to let you guys know that I'm working on a project called Project Arena. I think the news has been out a little bit about that. If you guys want to know more about Project Arena, just go to chaos.com/virtual production. It is a new platform that we've been working on, and we're looking for people to partner with, specifically people that have stages or virtual production stages that they would like to try out some of the stuff that we're doing. So if you're interested in this, just go to chaos.com/virtual production to find out more. Project Arena is based on Vantage, and if you guys want to just try Vantage, you can do that as well. In fact, I should note that Vantage 2 Update 4 is out, and there's been lots of updates going on there, and that includes adding UDIMs to Vantage as well as decals. And Vantage, as you might know, is our full ray tracer, a full real-time full ray tracing platform that we've been developing at Chaos for quite some time now, and is making its way into virtual production. So if you're interested in that, always go to chaos.com for more information. Again, that is chaos.com. We don't have any events that I know that we're announcing just yet. A few things are happening, but if you guys want to know more about our events, just go to chaos.com/events, and where all of our calendar invites are in there as well, and you can know more about those as we go along. And if you guys want to know more about the podcast, you guys need to just go to chaos.com/CG Garage. That's where we post all of our podcasts. If you'd like to follow us on Facebook, it is facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast. And if you'd like to watch any of these podcasts, all of our videos, including these podcasts, are posted at youtube.com/Chaos Group TV. And if you'd like to suggest some podcasts and some episodes you'd like to have on, we always welcome those. And we actually have been doing and getting some great ones recently, and we would love to continue to have that. So just don't forget, just email us, labs@chaos.com. Again, it is labs@chaos.com is our email. But for now, please enjoy episode number 477 featuring Joel Hynek.
Welcome to another CG Garage where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
Know a little bit more about you, where you came from, how long you've been doing this. You've been doing this probably one of the longest I've seen. Except I've had Doug Trumbull on, so he's been doing it for a little bit longer.
Oh yeah, yes indeed. Gosh,
but yeah, I'd love to know more your history. Like, how did you get into all this?
Wow. Well, it all started in college, really, when I switched majors to film, and my sound professor became my mentor, Tom Holman, and he said, Joel, if you want to get anywhere in the film business, you have to specialize. And so I figured, okay, I'll specialize in visual effects. So I did a bunch of student films with a lot of visual effects in them.
And this was when? Like around what time?
Okay. We're going way back here. 1974.
Okay.
Yeah.
So more practical stuff, obviously.
Yes. There was nothing computerized, but I did come up with this scheme for projecting graphics on a 20-foot long screen, and with a Bell and Howell single frame, I was able to animate these titles coming up. And so when I walked around the streets of Chicago, where I grew up, looking for a job, this one place called Ritter Waxburg, they thought I was a client and that needed help. And so I showed them these films and I said, "Oh no, I'm looking for a job." They go, "Okay, fine. We'll hire you as an animator's apprentice." And which I started out that way, but I really couldn't draw. But they were thrilled that I could work a calculator and move images around on an animation stand. Because the way they were doing it is they would make 1 million C-prints of, say, a Clairol bottle and put them on cells, moving them and having them at different sizes. It's crazy. I said, no, you just need one, and we'll just move it with the numbers. And they go, "Oh, okay." But because I couldn't draw, I ended up going to work at an optical house in Chicago called Visual Effects. And then from there, I went to manage an optical house owned by the same guy in New York. Okay. And did my first actual feature effect there. I came up with a scheme of doing trail zooms, I call them, the base streaks, but based on mats pulled from live action. So there was this sequence in Resurrection with Ellen Burstyn where she is dying. She almost dies. She sees the light at the end of the tunnel, which is in this smoky room with all these rays coming off of a projector. And so this effect, I could take her highlights and streak them, or anybody in heaven. And so that was really the first feature effect I ever did. And
wow. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. So when was that?
That was, I think, 1980. And, and I sent Doug Trumbull, as a matter of fact, because he was working on Star Trek, I think, the film at that point.
Oh yeah, the motion picture.
And I sent him. I met him actually because Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I don't know if you know this, but my dad, worked for the Air Force and came up with the classification system of Close Encounters of the First, Second, Third Kind. So anyway, that's
the famous story. I keep telling people that, like, Joel Hynek's dad came up with the Close Encounters scale.
That's right. So anyway, I met Doug Trumbull that way, and so then sent him examples of my streaks, and lo and behold, there it was in Star Trek, where they would do the the warp speed thing.
Yeah, the warp speed.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But then, after that, really the next film of note, I guess, is Predator. Doing the camouflage.
But didn't you work on Xanadu too? I want to get to Predator, obviously.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I did. And I used that streak effect actually in Xanadu. The muses, when they were roller skating, they had a streak behind them.
Right.
Yeah. Very good. You've done your homework.
Yeah, I have a little bit. Okay, because I was just like, Xanadu, man, that would be amazing to have on my IMDb.
Well, I did get to work with Gene Kelly on that. I mean, he was still at it. Yeah. And we were doing this match dissolve where he was dancing with Olivia Newton-John. And they would change environments, or as I recall, while they were doing the dance. And he did it exactly perfectly both times. I was amazed. Made it easy.
His own motion control.
That's right.
Amazing. Okay, so let's talk about Predator. Obviously, Predator was a big and important film. So what were the challenges? What were you doing, and how did you guys solve that Predator problem?
Well, we'd done title work for Joel Silver, who was the producer of Predator, and so he asked us to come up with, the camouflage effect. And so we had this red suit we'd use for a commercial, and so we had a girl run around in Griffith Park in a red suit and, pulled mats off of her and tried to do something. We tried all kinds of things, diffusing what was inside the mat of her, altering the frame rate, and everything just looked exactly like it was. It was not interesting. And so I had come up with this method on the optical printer for doing outlines of people. And very, very simple to do with a clear core and a black core mat. You just shift them a few times and you got your outline. So it's coming up on the time when we have to show something to Joel Silver. And a guy named Eugene Mammoet was our optical camera operator, one of them. And he had been experimenting with having the CG department make lines, lots of 500 lines, say, across the frame. And in this particular case, he tried circles, 500 circles, and used that on one frame to make the middle of the image get a little bigger. And I looked at it and I go, oh yeah, that's it. So, but there's no way possibly we could have actually done that, having the CG department make mats in the shape of a human, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I thought, oh, I know, but use the outline trick, but I'll do inlines and I'll do a whole series of them. And, so there'd be like 12 different inlines. And in each one, we would take a separately shot background, wider usually, and make it a little smaller, a little smaller, a little smaller. So it looked like a Fresnel lens. And the story goes, I was still racking my brain. Joel Silver's coming the next day. And I'm thinking, what the fuck are we going to do? So it suddenly hit me. Okay, I can make these inlines by burning out the previous one, the next one. And so I laid it all out on a layout sheet, all the steps involved, and gave it to the night cameraman. Came in the next morning, and there were 2 shots, camouflage effect. Joel Silver shows up, and we're looking at it on the Steenbeck, on the flatbed editing machine. And Richard Greenberg is there, my boss. And Joel Silver looks at it and goes, and looks at Richard and says, Richard, what do you think? Richard says, it's good, Joel, it's good. And at that point, he gets on the phone to John Davis and says, okay, we're going to do this movie. It was it was just like that. Wow.
That's amazing. Greenberg was a kind of a really impacted, like a very important person back in those days, right? Like the stuff they were doing, right?
Yes. Richard and Robert were both pretty savvy guys. And Richard, had an incredible sense of design. And the mainstay in those days was titles. They were doing all kinds of different title work. The Superman titles, for instance, streaks. Yeah. That's
cool. I had Julian Livy on recently, and he was talking about his time over there as well, which was cool. Okay. So the Predator effect was really cool. So how that must have been a big impact, because that was obviously well known, and that sort of established you. Do you feel that was the one that really sort of got you into doing some very interesting work at that point?
Yeah, I would say so. And the Academy also noticed it. And I remember, screening it at the, I guess it was the Bake Off, I think. And Kevin Pike, came and said, Joel, this is really great. We got to get you in the Academy. So that's when I became a member. Got nominated for it, but didn't win. So only
you lost to Inner Space, right?
That's right. Inner Space, yes. Which I thought was, I didn't agree with it. But.
Well, they're both very important movies, but Predator definitely is more known and renowned and has a longer history to it, for sure.
Yeah, that is true. And the other thing that was fun about Predator was lighting. With the heat vision was lighting with heat.
Right.
I have a story here, a funny story, if you want to hear it. First day, we're on the set with the heat camera. And I had worried about...
So this was an actual infrared camera that you were using?
It's an actual infrared camera. We had used it once before on a commercial, so I was aware of it. But it was only half res of TV at the time, so it was like only 274 lines. And but I had done a test in the Greenberg stage in New York, because I was concerned about the heat of the Mexican jungle. So did a little test and it determined that once you got like say beyond 92 degrees, you could not detect a human. It just was a kaleidoscope of colors. So I sent Joel Silver a memo saying, "Hey Joel, if it's going to be more than 92 degrees, it's not going to work." And so of course, first day we're on the jungle shooting with the heat camera. It's hot, and turned on the heat camera, and it's just kaleidoscope of colors. And Joel Silver starts screaming at me. He says, "Get Bobby Greenberg on the phone. This is a breach of contract." And he's yelling and screaming. I said, "Joel, the jungle's too hot. We're going to have to cool it down." "How?" "Let's just spray it with water." So the next day, these trucks show up, and we spray it down with water, fire it up. Still doesn't work. And I look over at these trucks, and they're painted black, and they've been sitting in the sun.
Oh, this is hot water.
It's hot water. And again, Joel Silver's screaming, breach of contract. And I said, "We're going to have to use cold water, Joel." And so the next day, cold water, ice inside there. It worked great. But then after that, the weather cooled down anyway, so we didn't have to do that, of course.
Wow. Interesting. That was pretty amazing. So you guys actually shot that in, I was like, did they actually shoot it with infrared cameras? It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I made a beam splitter, even on and that could go on a Steadicam, with the heat camera looking down into the mirror and the optical camera looking through. So we were concerned that people would not be oriented, that they would get too confused as to where they were compared to what they were seeing on the regular photography. So was able to combine the two images together, basically using the optical footage and just using a negative blue matte basically for that. So the structures were there, but they were part of the heat vision.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, that's great. I love Predator is still, if it's on, there's a few movies, right? When they come on TV, you don't change the channel, right? Like Predator is one of them. Good, Bad, and the Ugly is another one.
That's right. That's right.
Lawrence of Arabia.
They've all held up very well.
Yeah. Definitely a favorite of mine. Well, that's awesome that you're able to be part of that. But you've done some incredible stuff. You've worked on some classic, very important, like even like Weird Science and things like that. Like what was some of those early movies like? What was it like to be a visual effects artist back in the 80s?
Well, there weren't a lot. There were very few visual effects supervisors in those days. Maybe 12, in the whole world.
Right.
So it was a fun time. But optical work, was hard. It was, I don't know if you're familiar with an optical printer, but
actually, I was going to ask you that because I am, but some of my listeners would not be. So let's go ahead and talk them through the process. Like, what is an optical printer and how does it work? Like in those days?
Well, imagine a camera on like a lathe bed looking at a projector, and in the middle there's another film transport. So the camera is looking at two film transports, which one of them will have a thing called an interpositive, which is a positive piece of film that looks like a negative, but it's positive. And then in the other projector, other film transport, you'd have a matte, a high contrast matte, generally speaking. So you could shoot one side of a composite and then back up the camera, back up everything, change the matte, and do the other side. So that's how you would do a composite in those days. And there's no way to view what you've shot. So, you can look through the viewer and see what you're going to shoot, but you don't really know what you shot. So it was always a lot of tension the next day when dailies would come out. It's like, did it work? And I became afraid to go to dailies because usually it didn't. There'd be some problem, but enough.
Either the matte would slip, or the color's off.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, often it did work just fine, of course, and you always know what to do the second time after it didn't look good.
Yeah, but optical printing is kind of I think a lost art, or even just creating mattes was a challenge, right? Like, how do you create mattes? Like, what was the process of doing that?
high contrast mats of whatever you're looking at, or you'd have the animation people on an animation stand roto a shape based on a projected image down. They would roto a shape. Say you wanted to put something behind a building, they would roto that. You
hand draw it
hand draw it,
yeah,
hand draw it, and and if you had to roto a person, God forbid you had to do that. Each mat would be a separate one. That was something you avoided. So then otherwise, you'd be doing blue screen process where you're creating a mat that way, photochemically.
Right. And why were people blue was much more popular back then than green is now. So why was blue so important in those days?
Simpler. It was much simpler. Because if you're doing green, you have to involve both blue and red. But pretty much if you're doing blue screen, you're just dealing pretty much with the blue layer. And particularly if you had to make a synthetic blue separation, this is all being done with color separations, black and white film that one represents the red channel, green channel, blue channel. And you could go through a process where you made a mat that was the difference. They called it a difference mat. It was the difference between the green channel and the blue channel. So you would then apply that mat to the green pass, to the blue pass, using the color difference and the green bipack together in the same transport. Painstaking process, but it worked, and with the separations, you got a very nice edge. It wasn't like a high-con sharp edge. It was nice and gradated.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I think this is good. People need to know that this part. They just assume that mats are just magically created. They need to know why we pick blue, why is that the case? Well, that's awesome. So okay. So you were Predator, you were nominated for an Oscar. You got to go to what was the going on the red carpet back in the 80s like?
Oh, a lot of fun. It wasn't quite the big hoopla that it is now.
Okay.
But also, on that note, we did get, me and Robert Greenberg and a couple other guys got a sci-tech award.
Oh, nice.
For developing the optical printer that made Predator easier. And by that, I mean, using computer, it could roto position. So when the Predator's moving around and you're taking this larger image, because you'd switch lenses and shoot a larger image, you had to track it per the center of the Predator. And so you would do that by hand, and then hit a little button to remember the position. So then you could just run it and watch it, see how it's moving and edit it. So basically that was what the sci-tech award was about. And this printer had the ability to also project out onto a screen what the images were. So like, say, for Zelig, when we were using archival footage, which was not steady, we were steadying it by hand. So we projected out, say, pick one frame where there's like a lamppost, and just reference that the whole way through the shot by hand, adjusting it, steadying it. Yeah, but it worked.
So is it somewhat motion control as you're going through it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said like keyframe, and you just took.
Yeah, but it didn't do in between. So you had every frame was a keyframe. But you could.
Every frame was a keyframe. Okay.
Yeah, but so you could edit it though. In a way, you'd watch it and go, no, I got to fix frame 12.
Interesting. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so you got a sci-tech. Was that around the same time that you got the sci-tech?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was the year before or after Predator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. Okay. Well, then what was your next favorite film? Like, what did you get to work on after Predator?
Oh,
you can think of
next favorite film. Probably What Dreams May Come, I guess.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot going on. There was Commando, but that was nothing. And so I'd say, yeah.
You did Hunt for Red October a little bit too, right?
Oh, yeah, did consulting on that.
Okay.
And that was fun. John McTiernan, director of Predator, Also worked with him on one of the Die Hard movies.
Yeah.
After Predator and Judge Dredd, the first Judge Dredd. That's right. How could I forget that?
That's a crazy movie.
It is, because I had gone to work for Doug Trumbull in the Berkshires, because he was the king of
in Massachusetts.
That's right,
Yeah.
in the Berkshires, and he was king of motion bases, and he had done the Back to the Future motion base ride.
Yeah, that's right.
And he got a contract to do the entertainment centers for the Luxor Hotel.
Yes.
Which was that big giant pyramid-shaped hotel. So he was coming up with these really crazy ideas for the different events, attractions. And of course, one of them involved a motion base. And that was a lot of fun. But then they changed command at Luxor. And so I talked to Andy Vanya of Synergy into buying the Trumbull studio, because it had this. Doug made this huge gantry motion control system that, in a gantry you move, in X, Y, and up and down, and that was up and down. Anyway, so I thought, well, hey, this would be great. And Doug also, with this thing, was sort of pioneering making models really small. And so, you're using like F64 and, long exposures and lots of smoke, to give depth. Anyway, so.
Lots of light too, I'm assuming.
Lots of light, yes, lots of light. And so that's how we did Judge Dredd, basically, was with models, the same system that Doug had devised, and motion control. In London, marrying the set there to our models in the Berkshires with motion control. So, yeah, that was fun.
That's cool. That's cool. What was it working with Doug at those times?
It was great.
Yeah,
Doug was. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and particularly, I mean, we would take these trips to New York for whatever, look at stuff, and he would always want to go and get, fast food, burgers and fries, which he demanded I not tell his wife that that he was doing. But yeah, he was a great guy to work for. Very egalitarian, really. But because, in the office, we'd share an office together, and it'd just be a bunch of tables around. It was not like, I'm the king and here's my office. It was It was like one of the team. It was good. Yeah.
He was very bright. I mean, he really knew his stuff. Like, he really loved cameras, right?
Yeah. Yes. Amazing work, of course, he did on 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a chance to work with him for a little bit on a project where he was testing his, doing content for his Maji system, which was the 4K 120 frames a second stereo stuff. It was pretty crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was his chance.
He loved high frame rate.
Loved high frame rate. I mean, he actually patented a frame rate, 50 to 72 frames a second for show scan, which was his shooting.
Yeah, show scan. That's right.
Shooting 70 millimeter at 60 frames a second, and then projecting it the same way. And he was hoping that would, revolutionize the film business, but it didn't. So the Magi system was sort of his. Now that there was digital projectors, was a chance to actually make it happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a long talk with him about high frame rate, because he always was like, high frame rate, is it really good? And he was like, 48 is not enough. If you go to 120, then suddenly it makes sense. That's just a lot.
Yes. And so when we were doing those attractions for Luxor, we had to shoot it at 48 because because show scan owned the patent. Yeah,
that's right.
It was funny.
Interesting. Okay, well, that was cool. So you got to work on the Luxor projects. That's kind of an important project, actually.
It was fun. One of them was in what they call magazine format, which was 70 millimeter turned in portrait mode.
Right.
So the theater was extremely raked, very high rake. It was fun. It was, I mean, Doug, he had this way of thinking about doing things, in new ways that was a lot of fun to be around.
Yeah, I'm sure. I bet. Well, that's great. What was, so you said that your next big movie, do you remember, was really What Dreams May Come. Tell us how you got involved in that project.
Well, Steve Simon and Barnett Bain were the producers, and they got a hold of me and said, hey, we need to do this movie. We want Robin Williams to go into a painted world, a world that represents his wife's version of heaven, what that would be like. Right. And so we were there at Mass Illusion in the Berkshires and trying to figure this out. And somebody, I think it was Tim Rao, had run across a experimental film that showed how you could attach images to features in a moving image. And we go, oh, okay, that's it. That's how we can attach paint strokes to a live action image. Right. And did a test in Asheville, South Carolina. And there was a couple of bushes, and then we had attached these little round circles to every little feature on the bush, and it sold the project. And right. Oddly, that film went on hold, and then The Matrix came along, and I was the first supervisor on The Matrix, and Bo Marks was one of the producers, and he said, well, we tried putting a camera on a rocket sled, on a rocket on a rotating arm, but we don't think that's really going to work. And so
it's going to be like whip pan camera of some kind?
Yeah. Basically, the whole idea was to move the camera super fast so you could shoot high-speed photography while the camera was moving around. Right. And yeah. So we had seen the Rolling Stones video at the time, and where they had morphed between a couple of stills, and we go, oh, okay, but we have to do it. Can't do it that way. So I said, well, let's use a whole bunch of cameras in a big, all lined up. And so we did a test there in the Berkshires in our back lot that sold that movie. But then What Dreams came along, fired back up again. So there was having to work on two movies. So I said, John Gaeta, who was my assistant, here, you take The Matrix, and I'll do What Dreams May Come.
Okay. So Gaeta got The Matrix, and you got My Dreams May Come. Interesting.
Yeah, it was fun time. Since they both won the Academy Award, it was
amazing. So what was that your introduction? Were you doing that on CG or not at What Dreams May Come?
Oh yeah.
Yes. So when did you transition to CG? Like when was the thing that allowed that?
It was, transition to digital video happened at our Greenberg Associates, where I went from opticals to doing video digitally. And it was like you'd gone to heaven, because the simplest things, the hardest thing in optical printing was to do an invisible soft edge matte, Right. But digitally, you hit the button, done. It was incredible. But anyway, so it was with Doug. I set up the digital compositing department, and we had to work out our own blue screen algorithms, and that's where that started. And so then we beefed it up for Judge Dredd, and Jeff Kleiser. He was basically doing the CG for Doug, and so he also then became our CG department on Judge Dredd.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So that's where that transition happened.
Gotcha. And so when you worked on What Dreams May Come, obviously that was also digital, but Digital Domain was also working on that project. Was that your first time working with DD?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Kevin Mack at DD was
Yeah.
working on it, and he's working on the tree.
Right.
And the one that is, I think, was, well, it wasn't the same one in the painted world. It was one with all these leaves.
Right.
And then Stuart Robertson was working over at POP, working on Hell. I think that was his main thing. Yeah. And yeah, that was my first time meeting at Digital Domain. I remember in The Whale. You remember The Whale?
Of course. I think the Whale is still there. Like I think that whole building has been taken over by Google, but I did go in there and you can't really recognize the place, but the Whale is still there. So it kind of orients you when you see the Whale. It's like, oh, there it is. So yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. But were you still working in Massachusetts at the time, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, Robin Williams wanted to shoot. He insisted on shooting in San Francisco. Okay. So we basically moved the company to San Francisco, and at that point, it became Mannix Entertainment.
Which
they bought
made The Matrix.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So that was the move to San Francisco.
I didn't realize that Mannix was born out of What Dreams May Come. Like I just saw that it was birthed out of The Matrix somehow.
Well, somewhere in there, while we were working on What Dreams May Come, and we were doing the work under the flag of Mass Illusion, What Dreams. But when the work got into The Matrix, that's when Mannix bought Mass Illusion.
Gotcha.
And it was in Massachusetts for a while, but then moved the whole thing out to the Alameda Naval Air Station. Yeah.
Interesting. So what were you most happy with What Dreams May Come and how that went?
Oh, well, the painted world, really. The way that we could attach paint strokes to all the significant features in an image, moving image or not. Right. We were shooting at the Glacier National Park and didn't really know how much of an image we were going to use. As it turned out, we just used the geometry and the light, I guess, if even that. But the rest of it was just using the motion and the geometry to attach the paint strokes to. Yeah. But at the same time, little footnote, I also did the Columbia logo at that time in the Berkshires. Produced, designed, and directed it, which is still the one that's being used today. Really? Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. How did you get that? Well, through my friend Mark Schmugger, who was at the time working for Columbia. Yeah. And I knew his wife. Actually, she had worked at R. Greenberg. Okay. And Mark had gone through there also on a project. So that's how we got to know each other. And right. So he said, "Hey, Joel, want to take a crack at the Columbia logo?" And I said, "Sure." So I sold the thing as a 2.5D experience, sort of getting you into the two-dimensional world of film. Right. And Kleiser, Jeff Kleiser Walzak Construction Company, did the CG for it. Okay, nice. That's amazing. So I believe Stealth was a Columbia picture. So was that your Columbia logo in front of Stealth that you used? That's right. You remember working on Stealth. I do, and we'll talk about Stealth for sure. Okay. That's a crazy film. That film is not necessarily a film that is very memorable, but somehow so many things that working on that project were so important and interesting to me. I think it was a really interesting project. In retrospect, it was crazy, but it was quite amazing to work on that. I thought so too. Had more fun than you could shake a stick at flying all over Australia and New Zealand and to get those plates. One, I know you you say we can go off on tangents here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. But you're flying in the Learjet, trying to simulate a fighter flying close to the ground, trying to evade a missile,
Sure.
And I'm in the back looking at the monitor, and all of a sudden I hear the pilot say, "Oh, shit." And then suddenly the plane, does this sort of sideways jerk, and it felt like the plane had run into a snowdrift. And he said, we hit a power line. And yeah.
What?
I mean, actually, it was the guy wire holding up the power tower, but fortunately, the wire hit this thing called a stall strip, which is on the leading edge of a jet. And it's a little bit inboard, and the whole idea is to make the plane stall there first, so that you still have airflow over the ailerons when you're in a stall. And but it's a very strong piece of stainless steel. And if as it happened, it hit that, and then it wrapped around the wing and tore up the aileron, punctured the fuel tank, and if it hadn't hit that little strip, it might have torn the wing off, which is very fortunate.
Wow.
So anyway, then the pilot.
So you were in that plane when that happened?
Yeah. And Sven Gilbert, yes,
yeah,
Sven was in a helicopter nearby. And he saw the whole thing happen. And then, the poor pilot, this is his first time flying for Clay Lacey. And we were all concerned, he was concerned about publicity. So as soon as we got the plane on the ground, and he had to hold the yoke like this to keep it level. So then we immediately covered up the jet with blue tarps to try and hide from people what had happened.
That's insane. Wow. But this was also a time when we were I remember this was I think my third or fourth film that I'd worked on, but this was the last of the miniatures that were also being used. It was a time when we were doing CG and miniatures, and there were still like practical stuff. There was a lot of practical stuff that was done and mixed in with visual effects in this big explosion, huge explosions that were being done, right?
Yes. Yeah. John Fraser.
Yes,
he was.
If it's something big and boomy, it's going to be John Fraser.
That's right. Gosh, yes, and he was on Triple X also, which is a film that we did at DD before Stealth.
Yeah,
same.
And Fast and Furious. You also did some Fast and Furious stuff too, right?
I didn't. No.
Oh, you didn't.
No, that was.
But you did Triple X, right?
Yes, the first Triple X. Yeah.
And so that was your. So I guess that means that the Stealth was your second Rob Cohen film, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's crazy. He was a crazy director.
Yes, he was. He was a wonderful guy, and he was always encouraging the artists. In dailies, he would want to know, okay, who is the compositor on this one, and he'd do a shout out to them.
He was a very charismatic person. But honestly speaking, he was interesting as a director, but I think he was a fantastic producer. I think his background was actually in producing. And he had produced some really great stuff. I think he produced The Razor's Edge, which is an incredible Bill Murray film. It came out in the 80s as well.
Yeah, he was a very good producer. And he started out producing music for Motown.
Right.
Actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. But he did. You're right. He remembered everyone's names. Like if you said, he would turn around, like, you remember in dailies, he'd turn around like, who did this shot? And then he would remember your name.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good talent for a director.
Very good talent. It's funny now looking back, obviously that you and I worked on Stealth together, and then we met again over AI on the Lot. And, that movie was so much about like the threat of AI.
That's right. Eddie.
Yeah.
That is amazing. It's happening today, of course.
It is.
AI is
it is
flying those drones around.
Yeah. Well, let's catch me up a little bit. So obviously you and I worked on Stealth. Like I said, it was a lot of long hours, that film. But we were very, very ambitious. Turns out that lighting an airplane was not as trivial as you think it is.
That's right. Yes. And you were very good at that, I must say.
Yeah, I tried very hard. I really, really studied. I was obsessed with ray tracing at the time. And that was at my peak of when I was like, we have to transition to ray tracing. We have to transition to ray tracing. So I was very vocal, but I was very obsessed about airplanes because airplanes had this particularly good example because of the flatness of the way they are and how they rotate. They demonstrate the Fresnel effect of reflection really well as they go through that process. And so I was really into that. And I think people used to laugh about my obsession with Fresnel reflections, which has been, but that movie was the one that really showcased, when they're at a glancing angle, you can see the sky reflect really closely, but when they do this, the reflection kind of goes away.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Those planes look good. I must say. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
The aircraft carrier. Did you get to go on the aircraft carrier too?
I was a second unit director on the aircraft carrier for a week. Wow. That was something else because you're down there at night, and they were doing active operations. I mean, training operations out there in the ocean off of Mexico.
Yeah,
and getting the crew to get close to the planes the jets was not that easy. I mean, and of course they were very clear on where you could be and where you couldn't be. And a lot of them were afraid they were going to get sucked into a jet engine. But you had to be careful about that. But it's just, and I think it was also the first time a civilian helicopter was allowed to land on an aircraft carrier. Because we were using the Space Cam system with Coast helicopter flying, and we had some major problems with radar because the radar was so intense on that aircraft carrier that when the helicopter would get close to it, it'd fry it. It'd stop working, and have to go down and change a board. So And so we ended up covering up everything we could with aluminum foil in the helicopter to try and protect it.
You went through the ringer on that movie.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm glad you made it out alive.
Me too.
That's amazing. Okay. Well, that again, that was the last thing that you and I worked on. So I'm curious, what did you do after that? Because we need to catch up a little bit past stealth.
Sure. Might have been The Missing with Ron Howard, just a little work on that, and The Italian Job.
Oh, nice.
Some work on that there at Digital Domain. And then I took a leave of absence to work on Jumper with Doug Liman.
Nice.
He's a great guy to work with. And in fact, my favorite movie I think of all time is The Bourne Identity, which he had done.
Right.
And he told me that he wanted the car chase in The Bourne Identity.
Of course. It's one of my favorites. It's up there with Bullet.
Yeah. He told me that he wanted to do it actually only from the inside of the car, all the photography inside of the car. But the studio said, no, Doug, we have to see the outside also. But that was an interesting notion, and a lot of great stuff was shot from inside the car for sure.
Yeah.
Which leads me to another little interesting story.
Sure.
On Hunt for Red October, this involved Doug Trumbull as well.
Yeah.
McTiernan was, he hadn't figured out how really to shoot the exterior views of the submarine.
Okay.
And so he showed a rough cut of the film to Doug Trumbull. Uh-huh. And, after the end of it, Doug says, well, John, I don't think you should see the outside of the submarine. I think it should all be from inside the submarine. Mm-hmm. And McTiernan sort of looks at him and just gets up and walks away. That was it. It's funny.
Yeah.
brilliant people.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, people don't you only experience a submarine from within it.
That's right. That's right.
There's no real windows in a submarine.
Right. That's it. Yes. I guess that was his point.
Yeah. That is interesting. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So you were, you did the Italian Job, Missing. What were some of the other,
well, then The Mummy 3.
Oh, right.
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
And that was also a Rob Cohen film, right?
Yes. Yeah. That took me to China,
Nice.
where it was a co-production with a Chinese production company.
Uh-huh.
And have a helicopter story there. You know, we had, been waiting to get this helicopter there with the space cam on it.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, it kept getting delayed. It finally shows up. We have half a day to shoot 2 days worth of work. And so I laid out all these flight plans for the pilot on a piece of paper. Each one, I labeled them, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So that it'd be very clear, since we have very little time, what we're going to do. So we would try to let's try A. And there may be a problem. So, okay, no, let's go over and let's do B. And so that's how we got it all done. But in the midst of this, we're on our second shot. Suddenly we find ourselves surrounded by these Chinese helicopter gunships that are all, and we had two pilots. We had a French pilot, Fred Nord, and then a Chinese pilot. And the Chinese pilot is going, talking a million miles a second. And it turns out we were on a military base. This ground where we were shooting was sort of next to the military base, but they used it for tank practice. Right. And somehow the producers didn't get it across to the military people that this was a thing. So they're saying, get down to the ground. We want that camera. So we landed quickly and as fast as possible to disassemble the space cam, put it in a truck.
Wow.
Because we were afraid they were going to take it.
You've had a lot of helicopter and plane stories.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay. What were some of the other, so what have you been up to more recently? I'm curious.
Oh, well, after that, worked on a TV show called The Originals, three seasons of that with werewolves, witches, and vampires. And,
nice.
Everything goes along with that. And then did some films in China, one called Crazy Alien, with the main character was a CG alien that is mistaken for a monkey. And then also one working with John Hughes, called The Yin Yang Master, which had 22 CG characters in it.
Was that also a Chinese film, or?
Yes, also a Chinese film. And then, working on Journey to the West in China. It's a Monkey King. I mean, in those days, every year they would do a Monkey King movie, but this was going to be like the Monkey King movie. And but we, got as far as setting up the motion control stage, and then COVID hit, and so we all shut down, came home, and then that also sort of put a huge damper on the Chinese film business. And
interesting.
So they never got that film going again. But then various small projects during the pandemic, and then I ended up working for DNEG on the big film that they were producing called Ramayana, which is the origin story of the Indian gods, or the main Indian gods. And so it was, Namit Malhotra's passion project. DNEG was producing it, and they wanted me to act as the client supervisor. And so, went on for a couple of years, did tests and whatnot. And then I became very good, by the way, at shooting for scale. And also had worked on this TV show called I'm a Virgo, which is featuring a 13-foot tall black man. Okay. And so anyways, also they wanted to have characters of different sizes in Ramayana. So, that worked out well. But
Interesting.
But then the writer's strike happened, and
Yeah.
I became a casualty of that. People
Right.
were taking pay cuts. I think they're still on the pay cuts actually, and laying off lots of people. And they had some of their own people who had nothing to do. So they said, "Joel, sorry, we're gonna use our own guys on this." So that was that, and that was the most recent thing.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a shame what happened, but I want to get back to this to obviously the impact of the strike and COVID. But I'm curious. You did a lot of films in China. So what was your having done Hollywood and then Chinese Hollywood? What were some of the big differences that you noticed in that time?
Well, working 7 days a week, sometimes 14-hour, 16-hour days, was something that I wasn't sure I could do, but
Right.
I did. And fortunately, when you're doing visual effects, not every shot is a visual effects shot, or not every day. So there would be the occasional day off, which was amazing. It just so weird to actually have a day off.
Right.
Yeah, and weird things like we were shooting on these beautiful stages in Qingdao, and yet they would never bother to actually sweep the floor. They would just wet it down so that it wouldn't. They wouldn't. Yeah, it was weird things like that. And I actually had done some work in India before that, working for a company called Tata Alexi. Tata was the GM of India.
Okay.
And so we set up an office in Santa Monica and worked for them for 4 years, doing various projects. Jack the Giant Slayer, worked on some of that with Hoyt Yateman. And but their way of working was not that different from the Chinese, except they didn't work 7 days a week. They only worked 6. And in both cases, in India and in China, there's 1 million people on the set because labor is so cheap. You're just surrounded by these crowds of people, and each one has some job to do or assist in. And the directors have a lot of power in China. And in India, the actors have most of the power.
Interesting.
They set the schedule. Their whims are the whims that get taken care of. But I worked on a movie called Doom 3 in India, which at the time became the highest grossing box office film to date.
Right.
Working with a guy named Amir Khan, who was a wonderful actor and wonderful person. And he actually was responsible for some social reform in India, getting various laws passed. Like believe it or not, it wasn't illegal. Incest was not illegal in India until he came along and
Wow.
made sure it wasn't. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, that must have been an incredible journey for you, working in India and China for so much time.
Yeah, it was. But I enjoy, different environments. I always find it interesting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, you've been through a lot of different phases in the film industry. You remember, having, back from Predator days to here and there. And there's, having seen you at AI and a lot, I'm curious to think about what you think about how film is going now. Obviously, you've seen the transition from digital, but what are your thoughts on where technology is and how it's going to affect filmmaking, and even, whether it's going to make things better or worse under the conditions of like the strikes and all the other stuff going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. Better or worse, but I must say it feels a lot like when digital came along. When in the film business when digital compositing happened. It was a whole new era. And
how did people react to digital compositing? Like, how did a lot of the optical printing people react to it? Did they have super negative feelings about it, or were they all looking forward to moving to digital?
Some were, some weren't.
Right.
Some made the transition, others didn't.
Right.
A lot of the optical camera printers went on to doing regular jobs like, working for a railroad company as a dispatcher or selling tools, but then there are other people like Eugene Mammoet, who was he was a Ukrainian actually, and he and I had a bet as to when will video cinematography take over film, and I forget exactly what the bet was, but nonetheless, we were both looking forward to it. We thought, wow, this will be great,
right?
And but the transition was, it was very exciting, and but some people, didn't make it, and I think the same thing is going to happen now. With AI, there'll be certain jobs that AI can do very well, and I mean, I know one editor who was fired, replaced by another person who was using AI in editing. And
interesting.
She wasn't, and it was goodbye for her.
Right.
But gosh, the power of AI is astounding. And that's what was my takeaway from AI on the lot, was how many ways it's being used and the amazing things that it's being used for, like what you're using it for now for AI denoising is, and how
it's so simple, but what it enables is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea that you can so quickly get images up on an LED wall and control them from different platforms, not just Unreal, and actually have it work more robustly than Unreal is amazing, and basically eliminating the virtual art department, which is, I guess you could say, okay, maybe we're
the problem I think with I'm not necessarily saying that the virtual art department should go away. I'm just saying that they should focus on creating art and not sitting there optimizing data to make sure that it runs properly in real time, right?
I see.
Like an art department can be an art department, actually make art, right? And that's great. Like art department should not go away. I'm just saying that the process of sitting there removing polygons and optimizing the models so that it runs in real time, that's a tedious and horrible task that should not be necessary.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it sounds very glorious when you say I work for a virtual art department when all you're doing is just optimizing models.
But I mean, one of the things that is great about a virtual art department at LD is that they can change things, because you need to change things.
And you can still do that with what we're doing. Yep. And that's what you should be doing. Yeah. Except that in our process, you can do it with whatever you want to do it. You don't necessarily have to use just Unreal. You can do it inside of Vantage or Max or Maya, Houdini, and then it just translates very quickly to real time.
That is very cool, Chris. Very cool.
Thank you. But I mean, your thoughts about, like, do you have some fears about AI in terms of what it's going to do, what's going to enable, or are you just as excited as you were with digital?
Well, a little of both. I mean, as a supervisor, it really shouldn't affect me. It should just help me. And but I guess right now, in the sort of a downturn in the industry, there's just so many visual effects supervisors that there's not enough work to go around at the moment.
Sure.
But that could change. But also embracing AI, I think anyone who wants to stay in the business is must embrace AI. I don't think it'll be possible not to. And I'm excited about it and playing with it as much as I can.
What are your favorite things that you've noticed in AI that you're excited about?
Well, that it can actually do on-screen content. And it can help you arrive at a design very quickly. Right. Which is very helpful when you're trying to come up with something, some effect. it was very helpful on the last project I was on in doing that. With Mid-Journey, coming up with stuff that, okay, it could look like that. And I guess some of used to working with India, they're amazing roto artists, and they can paint out anything.
Sure.
But
that's the place to go if you need roto.
That's right.
$100, your shot's done.
That's right. They're amazing. But it's that kind of stuff that AI can also do, like automatic roto, and that will make the process cheaper and faster. And I guess one of the things that, there's two companies I'm aware of that can, you can input a script and it'll put out storyboards for you.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a short step before it's doing previs. So, previs artists might not be very happy about this, but it should make the process faster and cheaper, which for independent filmmakers, it should be a boon for them, I would think.
Mm-hmm. And I heard the same thing where you input a script and it does a budget.
That's right. Does a budget also. That's right. Does a visual effects budget, breakdown. Yeah. So that should make the process faster. And I've spent a lot of time doing breakdowns. Yeah,
so have I. I think I actually enjoy doing breakdowns. That's okay.
Me too.
I do. What I love about it is that because, it's just like you were thinking, it's like when you're doing a breakdown, you're coming up with a price, but you're also thinking of crazy new ways to solve a problem, right?
Right.
You're like, wait, what if we do it this way? Oh, no, we could do it this way. We could, and so that process is kind of
That's right. But of course, people are always yelling at you, come on, can't you get that breakdown done? Those 3,000 shots, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just make it cheaper. That's like, but what do you independent filmmakers? So this is a thing that I think is very interesting to me. I actually do believe that there's going to be a big boom in independent filmmaking and people creating amazing, beautiful stuff that we haven't seen before because of this big boon. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think so. My daughter's a screenwriter, and her partner, they did the live action version of Mulan. And, wow. We're working for Skydance, and they have a lot of pans on the stove, I guess you say, right now. So they're doing great, and they're not worried about AI at all.
Interesting.
And they might even embrace it in some fashion, but they recognize that AI doesn't really, and as was often expressed at AI on the Lot, what AI does is comes up with the mediocre version of what you're trying to do. It comes up with the average.
Yeah, it by design, it comes up with the most predictable result.
Right. But I understand that, and I know that in upcoming Alien Romulus, there's some on-screen content that was AI generated, but they use their own input data, so it's not a copyright deal.
Right.
Which is, I guess, one of the major issues that needs to be worked out, or
sure.
But I think there's an AI software called Invoke that I believe makes it easier for you to just use your own stuff, and come up with images and make them move. That in one sense, you kind of think, oh, gee, okay. Is AI going to, do compositing? Is it just going to take over that job, or is it just going to take over, creating CG images without a lot of the people that are usually involved? I don't know. Maybe it will at some point.
I think to some extent, but not. You and I have sat in screening rooms, and we've looked at pixels and grain patterns and fussed over half pixel mats, right? There's no way that you can do, AI is not going to get to that level just yet. We still have an eye for that stuff. You know what I mean? And we still are, people rely on your skills specifically to make that. And you can't tell an AI to fix a half pixel matte.
That's right. That's right. Yes. It's very awkward to use, really, if you have a specific goal in mind. If you wanted to do,
it's good at broad strokes, though.
Broad strokes or fantasy things that don't have a real, a real world reference, or something to compare it to in the real world.
Yeah. For sure.
I mean, what do you think? What's your take on the AI business thing?
Well, in terms of the efficacy of it, I think, first of all, the word ethical is a weird word to use for AI. I think, to me, it's like ethical or cage-free eggs. Like, what does that mean?
Right.
Right. So the term ethics is kind of a weird thing because the problem, really what people are talking about is copyright, right? And the copyright is something that needs to be decided in courts, not in public opinion. So you can't use ethics as a way to describe, well, this is ethically sourced AI. That doesn't make any sense. So that particular issue, I think I'm very eager for it to be solved through the court system. And there are people who are doing some incredible work in trying to get those answers. Including a fantastic woman named Carla Ortiz. She's definitely fighting AI against artists, which I'm okay with what she's doing. I think it's really great. At the same time, what do I think about it? My thoughts are, I'm for filmmaking and whatever tools and allow me to make films and to tell stories, I will embrace, be it AI or be it 16 millimeter film, whatever it is. I just want to tell stories, and I'm just excited for that process.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes. I guess it will allow us, allow some voices to be heard that aren't normally heard or aren't normally, squashed by the studio system.
It's going to lower the barrier to entry. Yeah, for sure. Sure. What were your thoughts about the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once?
I had a hard time getting into it, actually. Yeah. It was a little bit too much Everything Everywhere All the time for me. But, I think on a second viewing, I liked it more. But the first time I thought it, I don't know.
I think that's exactly because, I've been sort of ranting. I have another podcast called Martini Giant where we're talking about films. I've been ranting about the fact that we've been steeped in our nostalgia for the 1970s and 80s for so long that we keep shoving Star Wars down people's throats. It's been almost 50 years, right, that we've been looking at Star Wars and we're still trying to milk that franchise. I'm just using as an example. I still like Star Wars. I'm not saying anything about it, but that was my film from when I was 6 years old, right? So that's dates me. So I was 6 years old. I saw Star Wars. I was like, that's my youth, right? There is no youth film. And I think that Everything Everywhere is possibly my kids' generations, their kind of film, right? This expresses a frenetic pace that they're used to. We're not used to. We're too old for that. But they are. And I think it's very interesting to see that because instead of doing that, we just keep rehashing things and refranchises from, Ghostbusters or whatever over and over again.
Yeah. Or like all the Marvel movies. It's same stuff over and over again.
So while I don't necessarily understand everything about Everything Everywhere, I'm a little bit like you. I do appreciate it. I thought it was cool to look at, but I was most excited about something different. Like finally, right. And they did embrace a lot of AI to make that happen, right?
I don't know, but
yeah, they did.
They did, huh? Oh, oh, that's
they used a lot of stuff with Runway. They used a lot of stuff with Roto. So they did a lot of the effects themselves, just kind of on their own, using a lot of AI tools. And I think that's great. And I think that when you see filmmakers just sort of taking control of their film and not having to deal with the studios, I think because they hold the purse strings, then it makes it a little bit more interesting what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to look forward to there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite film?
My favorite film?
Yeah.
Of recently or?
Okay, I'll say recently.
I think there's some great films out there that came out. Surprise film. I always like the films that people don't remember or they're a little bit odd, a little bit off. My favorite film, honestly speaking, or I will say one of my favorite films is Paris, Texas. Believe it or not, that's an old film.
Paris, Texas.
A Wim Wenders film from way back in the 80s.
Is that the one that revolves around a movie theater?
No.
Well, that's the motion picture show.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Paris, Texas is what's his name? He's a guy, a vagrant, and he's kind of lost, and his brother picks him up, and then he ends up looking for his wife, played by Rosanna Arquette, and she works at a sex booth in Texas. Very fascinating story. Really great. Beautifully shot.
A sex booth?
Yeah, one of those booths where you put the money in and you see the person stripping.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Ah,
Yeah.
It's a period piece.
Yeah, it's from the 80s. It's a really good film.
I'll have to check it out.
But besides that, I think that there's I think things like Everything Everywhere are interesting. I think movies like Poor Things are very interesting as well. I actually think Swiss Army Man, also done by the same guys who did Everything Everywhere, is a fascinating film. And I think there's a lot of underrated films that came out recently. There's a movie called The Iron Claw, which is a movie about wrestling that I did not expect to be super cool. Was incredible, and I cried a lot in that film.
Really?
It's a beautiful film.
Iron Claw.
Yep. Okay. And it definitely pays tribute to a movie that we all know called The Raging Bull.
Oh, okay.
It's a good movie. Definitely recommend that. The Iron Claw. And that's available on streaming now. So really good stuff. Yeah. Excellent. I don't know. I think that I'm excited about films today. And I think that while I'm not necessarily saying AI is going to, I'm not excited. I am excited about AI because I believe that more films that are creative are going to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's we'll figure out how to get there, and we'll figure out all the quote unquote efficacies or legal issues. That's something I trust. It's just going to take time. It's going to take about 3 to 5 years for all the legal stuff to fall through. But once we figure that out, then we can move on. But listen, AI is saving lives right now too, right? A lot of breast cancer is being detected through AI tools. So I'm not.
Yes, it's definitely something we should embrace.
Yeah, for sure.
I understand that in South Africa, you can copyright an AI image. You can.
Interesting.
There's no issue. They have no issue with it, like here.
So I think a lot of great comic books are going to come out of South Africa. I'm not kidding. Yep. Interesting. All right. I'll tell a friend of mine who's been writing his AI comic book.
At the AI on the lot, there was this one thing about how is AI going to fit into your company's AI strategy, or what's your AI strategy going to be? And there was a number of interesting people there. One of them was,
I think people are trying to shoehorn it into something, like they feel like they need to incorporate it, and it's kind of weird in that way. Yeah,
I mean, for a while it was like, oh no, I haven't now. But now it's like, okay, how can I use it? And the showrunner, I forget his name. He was the showrunner on Bourne Notice, and he was talking about how when he would set up a show, he would define the A story, the B story, and the C story that were going on throughout the series, and he realized that what he had just done, which he would then give to the writers in the writers' room, was do a prompt. He'd actually just written a prompt. And so that got him to thinking. And he then, long story short, what he's trying to do these days is he'll write like the first act of a script and then do the ending. And they'll have AI do the middle, which is what he's trying to see if that works.
Interesting. Yeah. How do you get from A to B?
Right. Right.
So the big landmarks are interesting. Yeah.
And then, of course, when you see people like Ed Albrecht in metaphysics, who are doing amazing work with AI, making people's faces so quickly.
Yep.
That astounding.
Astounding for sure. Well, listen, Joel, thank you so much for being on. I mean, we went a little long and we went on some great tangents. I told you we would go on some great tangents.
Yeah.
And it was good catching up with you. I'd love to, keep us posted as to what you're up to next. I'm sure you'll be involved in some cool stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, actually this weekend, this is a little off subject, but I'm going to Contact in the Desert, which is the big UFO conference of the year. My brother and I will be presenting a workshop on how basically to get proof of your encounter with an alien or whatever experience, whether it's a DMT
for the Hynek scale, right?
That's right. It's basically trying to come up with an addition to the Hynek scale.
Okay, so what are the scales, just so people can know the different scales?
Well, it's a workshop, but there's convincing, there's compelling, and there's curious, which are the three levels of that. And then they all break down to A, B, C, D, depending on what type was it. There was technological proof or evidence. Was it emotional? Various ways of classifying it. But my brother Paul is the one who's sort of been carrying the Hynek UFO torch. And he's making 4 presentations at this event this weekend, and one of them is the confluence of aliens, DMT, and Bitcoin. So that one I'm looking forward to.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. It's been a blast talking to you.
Been a blast talking with you, Chris. And thank you. It's been a lot of fun.